Thanks for having me. And just to give a bit of an introduction, I'm attached to the PRISM lab in Leiden University, led by Michiel van Elk, and we're just a group of interdisciplinary researchers, practitioners, and philosophers with an interest in altered states of consciousness. So we do all kinds of cool research, from psilocybin retreat studies and scale development, where I'm involved, to research with ketamine, awe experiences, and other non-pharmacological ways of inducing altered states of consciousness. But today I want to talk about something else. This has come out of a collaboration with Feral Ecology's lab and Yogi Hendlin, who I've been working with on this project. He's an environmental philosopher and also has a strong interest in ecologically embedded practices. And so what I want to talk about today fits in neatly with the previous presentation, where Flores laid out all the difficulties of having a scalable access to psychedelic treatments and deal with the costs, etc. And he specifically left out the topic of this new type of non-hallucinogenic psychedelics, which is perfect because this is what I want to focus on in my talk. And so this idea was inspired by a 2022 article by Ellie Dolgen, who wrote an article called Taking the Tripping Out of Psychedelic Medicine. And this has sparked a little bit of a debate, but there has been relatively little traction on this in the meantime. And in the background, several biotech firms started developing these psychoplastogens. And now this year, the first or one of the first of these, based on a derivative of LSD, came out, developed at the University of California. And this sparked social media outlets such as this post from the Science page on Instagram, which is quite popular, to say things like, you can now have the healing and the mental treatment, the benefits of psychedelics without the hallucinations, or even outrageous statements as it being 100 times more potent than ketamine. I don't know where they got that number. It's not from the original publication. Either way, the point is that this seems to be a new way in which some of the problems we heard about before can miraculously be bypassed. And for those who are not very familiar with the subject, a bit of background on this novel type of compounds called psychoplastogens. There's also other engineered psychedelics, such as those that kind of condense the duration of the experience, but I'm specifically focusing on those that promise the effects of psychedelic therapy without any subjective effects being suppressed or completely engineered out. And this is marketed as scalable and insurable treatments for mental health, obviously with easier access maybe than a full-blown psychedelic therapy program. And I'm using this here as a case study to critique the general commercial and epistemological shift that we've seen in psychedelic science in the last few years. And there's a few central questions that are guiding me through this that I would like all of us to reflect on, which are, is therapeutic plasticity without phenomenology enough? Are we expanding access or narrowing the imagination? And how do systems of knowledge and power determine what counts as medicine? And also as a disclaimer here, I'm again using this as a case study. I'm fully acknowledging that there might be useful applications of this for populations that have maybe contraindications with classical psychedelics, or there might be specific conditions where derivatives of classic psychedelics could have therapeutic use. I'm also not claiming that everyone who is on board on the psychoplastogen discussion is claiming that subjective effects are not needed at all. For example, Olson, who has written on this a lot, is saying that they are important but not required to have benefits from it. And this basically all just goes back to the fact that there are some biomarkers of neuroplasticity that we usually associate with psychedelics that you can still find if you administer these substances, even if there's no subjective effects. And the central argument that I'm trying to make is that the psychedelic renaissance is not just medical, it is commercial, and that this development of psychoplastogens reflects a more wider transformation in how psychedelics are conceptualized, commodified, and controlled, and that what is at stake here is not just therapeutic efficacy, but the general purpose and potential and framing of psychedelic healing. And there's a few frameworks that I'm drawing from in this talk. A very important one is the commercial determinants of health, which is describing the general patterns and strategies in which medical knowledge and practice and research interests are shaped by economic interests. And I'm trying to make the point that psychedelic science is increasingly situated in these dynamics. I'm drawing from a biopsychosocial, or if you want, ecological model of health, where we view health and mental illness as embedded in social, ecological, and structural conditions, rather than reducing them to just brain chemistry. And also importantly, viewing psychedelics as non-specific amplifiers, so their effects do not just depend on the substance, right? They do depend on the subjective experience, hidden setting, contextual framing, etc., and that these are not separable. And there's obvious some tension there between like these frameworks and this understanding of psychedelics, and then the characteristics of medicalization, because biomedical paradigms seem to or tend to frame suffering and individualized pathology as something that can be treated as symptoms, and the psychedelic effects being kind of more of a side effect, pushing a bit in the background the social, political, and ecological dimensions of health and disease. So in general, I would say we have seen a shift in the psychedelic field in recent years, where from counterculture and psychedelic enthusiasm, we're shifting more and more to capital and economic interests. There is more and more VC funding and companies involved that have incentives to develop their own treatment protocols. The market is increasing rapidly. And as an effect of that, we see that psychedelic research is increasingly shaped by these commercial interests. So this includes the research questions, the populations that are selected, the treatment outcomes, and importantly, the emphasis is more on the efficiency, the scalability, and the patentability of these treatments rather than the full potential. And as a wider consequence, psychedelic medicine seems to be more and more redefined to fit these biotech markets. So relational and spiritual dimensions of healing are being reduced to standardized biomedical treatment protocols. And this reflects a general epistemic shift from contextual healing to target-based pharmacology. And why are psychoplastogens so important here? Well, they're both very characteristic of this commercial shift, but also directly tailor to these economic interests that I just described. because by redesigning psychedelic compounds, you enable IP control, market control. Right? As soon as you change something, you can own it and sell it and market it. And they directly address a lot of the current challenges that we experience in making psychedelic therapies accessible, because it's obviously much more cheaper and easier to insure and regulate if we don't have to bother with the inconvenience of the whole trip and everything, and the disruption that it caused, and the preparation and integration that it needs. And it's more compatible with existing psychiatric models such as SSRIs. And as a side effect of that, the subjective effects are recast as liabilities, right? So rather than being the focus of the investigation, it is more and more framed as something that is inconvenient and in the way of making things more accessible and marketable. So this is why psychoplastogens are, even though it's a niche topic, a very good case to discuss this in a wider sense. And like I said, this fits in the general framework of commercial determinants of health, where we see how corporate practices shape health outcomes and research priorities, often in ways that are not in line with what is really the best from a public health perspective, but just what works best for these stakeholders. The focus on IP protection by enclosing natural substances is not exclusive to psychedelics. This is something we see across the board in the medical field. And like I said, there's a general shift that we can see in how commodification shifts the emphasis from healing to scalability and market alignment, which also marginalizes non-medical use and other knowledge systems. And to align psychedelic medicine with public health, we need something different, all right? So I'm trying to, in the rest of this talk, unpack a little bit why I think that without structural reform, psychedelics risk to become tools that uphold the current systematic inequities rather than challenge them. So just for the sake of argument, let's say we do engineer the tripping out of psychedelics. What gets lost? Right? I think a lot of us would probably agree that a subjective psychedelic experience is central to clinical outcomes, not incidental. Right? And we already heard a lot on these subjects in the blog yesterday on beyond medicalization. But just to give a brief overview, a lot of research highlights the importance of emotional breakthroughs, mystical experiences, and how they influence the improvements in mental health symptoms. We know how important meaning-making, interpersonal connectedness, and emotional insight is as key mediators of a sustained improvement. More and more is recognized how the social context matters, not just by enhancing the effects through bonding and social experiences when taken in a community setting, but by actively reframing social relationships and having psychological adjustment related to that, and how this improves the outcomes. Then nature connectedness, we heard a lot about the sustainability dimension yesterday already, is more and more recognized as well, how psychedelics can foster pro-environmental and sustainable behaviors and can be a catalyzer to process ecological grief that a lot of people in modern society are experiencing. And all of these dimensions are lost in any attempt to over-pharmaceuticalize psychedelics. So what I'm trying to say is that apart from just the therapeutic efficacy and what is the best practice, this development and some of the assumptions and implications that come along in the development of these new compounds, they're threatening the general emancipatory potential of psychedelics, both for treating individuals and society at large, right? So we know that psychedelics can support psychological flexibility and meaning making, right? Rather than just reducing symptoms, that they can directly enable the confrontation with alienation, social fragmentation or isolation, or in some cases, ecological grief. And this is arguably not just neurobiological, right? It's relational, it's political, it's ecological. And more and more, not just in the case of psychoplastogens, medical frameworks seem to treat these as side effects or inconveniences rather than core mechanisms. And this also mirrors, in general, how we've seen for other substances, how spiritual and plant-based knowledge is kind of extracted and adapted within the market-driven biomedical frames. And the risk that I see down the road with this is that psychedelics are reduced to tools for adaptation rather than transformation, right? So rather than helping people to challenge the conditions that might contribute to their suffering, we simply make them adapt or give some short-term relief. In my opinion, this is not what we should be doing. And I'm thinking of this a little bit also in the notion of a side effect society, which you can interpret in multiple ways, where we see how psychedelics once promised rupture from fixed pattern suppressive systems. But these kind of notions of psychoplastogens remove all of that, right? So there's no confrontation or intensity or break with the status quo. And we see how, in general, in our medical system likes to treat symptoms rather than systems, right? And kind of ignore the deeper roots of suffering. We heard about this a lot in different talks, which is now more and more, in my opinion, starting to affect psychedelic care. And then ironically, there are plenty of other medications that have significant side effects that we seem to tolerate. But then at the same time, psychedelic experiences and the disruption and turbulence that comes with it, this seems to be a side effect that the medical system does not want to easily accept. So rather than supporting relation and ecological healing, there is a risk that psychedelic substances are being reduced to tools for productivity and compliance. And I'm not saying that everyone who is advocating this has bad intentions, but in a way, it is part of the design, right? That by actively trying to filter out the inconvenience of the subjective experience, the transformation that seems to be core to why psychedelics do what they do is kind of removed as an unwanted side effect. So what do we do with all of this? I would like to urge all of us to be mindful of this and think about how to best reclaim the framing of psychedelics beyond this commodified version, right? I know that as scientists, we like to stay out of the public debate a little bit and leave it up to the media and the podcasters and whatever to form their opinion about it. But I think it is very important that we communicate things in a way that psychedelics are not just understood as being biomedical tools, whether psychoplastogens or classic psychedelics in general, but that they are relational experiences that are rooted in context, community, and ecology. And that not despite the trip, but through the trip, all of the good stuff happens, right? And in a way, there is a potential for psychedelics to challenge the dominant models in psychiatry, right? By emphasizing the importance of non-pharmacological factors, right? So I'm saying that rather than just trying to increase access no matter the cost, we have to advocate for a general shift from symptom management to systemic healing, right? And I had a conversation with someone here at the conference yesterday about this, and she was saying, well, if we don't give any meaningful context to any type of psychedelics, it's like taking steroids without going to the gym, right? So this is the misunderstanding that I'm trying to avoid, and how the public debate is developing, right? That without giving it meaningful context, there's not much happening, right? What use is a window of opportunity if there's no psychological content to reflect on that can drive the adjustment afterwards? So I think this fits in a general conversation about how to move towards psychedelic public health. And again, I want to reiterate, I don't think that psychoplastogens are inherently harmful, or that they cannot have some useful applications for specific conditions or populations. But that their emergence reflects a general commercial and epistemic shift that we see in psychedelic science and how it's shaping research and practice. And I think that we should, in order to retain the transformative potential of psychedelics, that we should actively advocate for embedding these experiences in meaningful contexts, whether that is community settings or nature-based settings. Whether that's classical psychedelics or psychoplastogens, there needs to be a relevant context for any useful psychological improvement to happen, right? And this public health approach must prioritize context, equity, reciprocity, not just access or efficiency. It's kind of one of these cases where it sounds like too good to be true. So yeah, I just want to say that psychedelic science can do more than merely heal or treat symptoms. It can not just emancipate society at large, but it can also help to reimagine care, community, connection, and how we do mental health care in general. So special thanks to Yogi Handlin, who has been collaborating with me on this, and my colleagues from the PRISM Lab who helped me to prepare for this. And I hope there will be some comments as well, because again, I'm just trying to make all of us a little bit aware of this and stimulate a discussion. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian, for addressing this very pressing and interesting issue. I see a hand is already up here and then over there. So let's take some comments and questions. And your third, Yusuf.
Thank you. This was super interesting. And I like the way how you are quite skeptical of the commercial incentives that are growing all the time on the field. But on the other hand, we also need the commercial incentives, because otherwise nothing will happen. So what are your thoughts? How can we align the commercial incentives so that we can also include the trip?
Well, thanks. That's a really good point. And I'm not claiming to have the big answers to how to overcome these bigger structures that are influencing research and medical care, not just for psychedelics, but in general. But I still think that the framing and the communication is very crucial, especially right now in this critical point of where regulatory networks and society is more and more getting familiarized and exposed to this. Very important to clearly communicate. And if we leave up if we leave it up to third parties to market this as biomedical tools that will do the magic in the background, and this is how it is received by society and by regulatory institutions, then we're just contributing to a big a misunderstanding. So I think you're right. There always needs to be some economic interest, and we cannot fully break out of this. But we can be more mindful and more careful in how we communicate things outwards, which is maybe less necessary in other domains, but especially in psychedelic science, I think it is increasingly important.
Thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate your perspectives also on the commercial aspect and how it relates to the subjective experience. But what I think is also a bit critical when we talk about being careful about language is this idea that this is something new and a new paradigm, because I think this is more like emphasizing the very narrow biomedical perspective on what therapy is or the healthcare system is. So I think it's equally dangerous to frame this as a new paradigm rather than looking at what is there. And I mean, the biopsychosocial model of health is something that's already there, and also the contextual. So instead of saying, oh, they're doing something new, rather integrate what we have already and refining maybe the claim a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And I mean, apologies if it didn't come across like that. I'm not trying to say that this is a very new development, right? It's also why I try to kind of situate it in this general context of how we see this happening in the medical industry and research and pharma industry in general. But still, I do think that especially in recent years, and other speakers have commented on this as well, the focus seems to shift more and more away from what we already know about the biopsychosocial model of health, etc., in terms of that the focus seems to be how can we reduce the therapist time? How can we make this cheaper and accessible by eliminating as many variables as possible, rather than emphasizing exactly those, right? So this is kind of where I was getting at a little bit, that now as different stakeholders are trying to get their treatment protocols approved, that we're kind of shifting away from where a lot of people, I think, inside the psychedelic community want to go towards, in terms of focusing more on contextualized practice, more on integration and therapy and this component. So, I think it's a bit of a crossroads situation. And this is why I'm trying to bring a little bit more awareness to it. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. I found you had really well formulated criticism towards many issues. One thing I was thinking about, you talk about this kind of broadening the medical framework towards that kind of biosocial ecological paradigms, but I wonder whether the whole medical framing is too narrow, and I'm interested in the non-clinical potentials of psychedelic and thinking about the communal aspects and the ecological aspects. Like other direction would be just kind of more emphasize researching the kind of non-clinical use and use kind of utilize those potentials kind of outside the clinical context, and this kind of dynamic, whether it's kind of too much to demand from the kind of psychiatric institutions that they could accommodate all that transformative potential, and maybe we have to find other kind of venues to kind of get all the potential benefit out from.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, there's only so much you can put in a 20-minute presentation, where there's a whole paper behind this where we also discuss this part of it more. I still think it is important to talk about in this context, because this will ultimately also influence how psychedelics and what they can do for people in society are perceived outside the medical and clinical scope. So I don't say that we have to squeeze all of this into clinical treatment protocols. I'm saying that by kind of neglecting the side of it and letting this development and this machinery run more, we are more and more restricting it across the board. And that includes non-medical use as well, right? It will ultimately marginalize any non-clinical use of psychedelics and whatever you could gain from that as well, if it is framed in the way that some of the people in this field start doing more and more. Yeah, but I agree with you.
Well, listening to you, I was thinking of several points I could address. But one thing that I would like to ask you is if we could consider psychedelics nowadays some kind of a Trojan horse in this paradigm, because it's difficult to think of someone doing psychotherapy, either psychedelic assisted or regular one, and not thinking about social issues. Right, so getting more aware about how one's suffering is built up due to lack of public policies and whatever. So there is some kind of a moral instance related to the discussion nowadays due to the pharmacological aspects of psychedelics. And so I'm wondering if we could be a little bit optimistic and just let it go as we have a Trojan horse in our hands and see what happens further down the road.
So what exactly is inside the Trojan horse?
This perspective of people getting access to thinking differently, having different experiences, having being epistemic challenged, and
Yeah, I agree with that, and I don't think we need to push this more than we are already doing in that sense. But I still think that again, this potential misunderstanding of how, for example, in the case of psychoplastogens, it is more and more framed as something that, will just do the plasticity and that is inherently good. I think that is just going in the opposite direction of what you just described, what we want to see, in the sense that we want people to understand psychedelics as something that makes sense in the context of other things, right? Rather than just being something that does the magic in the background. So we're just going back to this, going to the gym, not taking steroids, but not going to the gym thing, where it's like, it doesn't matter what type of psychedelic it is, if you just prescribe it to people and send them home with it, then you're missing out on everything else. And that's also why I made this parallel to SSRIs, because I'm not saying that SSRIs are not useful, but I'm saying that in a similar way that I'm kind of predicting here, in many cases, they are nowadays just prescribed by a GP, and people are sent home with it, and it is not integrated in a wider therapeutic sense. And this is not what the scientific community has been saying about in terms of how they should be used. But still, a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to start taking this and I'll be better. And it's not as easy as that. So I just want to avoid that we're making this mistake with psychedelics or psychedelic-derived new treatments in terms of how people will be using it.
Thank you for your questions and comments, and thank you once again, Julian.